a warm welcome and it's all here.
Let's pray before we do anything else. Creator, we thank you for bringing us together today. We thank you for the gift of sobriety and for our lives and for the freedoms that we have. And we just ask that your presence can be felt by all of us here today, that you can help open our mind, open our heart to stretch our minds and our imaginations so that we can learn new things. Help us to not be cluttered up with our own ideas and fixed ideas from the past. Help us to just shed those so that we can learn new things about how to better serve you and help other people. Amen. All right. Steve, thank you. Hey, first thing, I'm not an expert on traditions. So, know that. Nor am I an expert on AA history or anything like that. I would much rather be at home watching Game of Thrones or something like that. Something spiritual. Matthew, that's right. But here we are. No, and it's good to be here. Good to be in my right mind. Good to be sober. I am. My sobriety date is July the 2nd, 1989. I think I know just about everybody here, except for maybe Dakota. I got a home group. Home group is There's a Solution in Holly Springs. Some of y'all have spoke there or been there. Grateful to that group. It's a good group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Been continuously sponsored for a long time. Had my current sponsor for about 30 years. So, and Alcoholics Anonymous has basically changed my life and it's given me a new way to live without drinking. And so, a couple things before. Come on in, man. Right on the schedule. You need any coffee or anything? You sure? Okay. We're practicing tradition, so you can do what you want to do. I mean, yeah, all right. Hey, so a couple things before we kind of get into the material. If I would just encourage you to try to have an open mind. What I'm going to be sharing with you is my own experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be your experience. So what I always try to do at things like this, when somebody else is doing the talking, instead of comparing or scoffing at what the person says, I try to just see how that applies to my own experience, and how can I apply that and try to keep an open mind to learning and maybe using my imagination to see how stuff can apply instead of how it doesn't. So just a few things. I mean, because traditions are, if you're talking about traditions in your personal life, there can be some opinion involved in it, or some deep-seated values or beliefs that the person has that may not line up with what you believe, and that's fine. Don't use whatever I kind of come across as just shutting you down to where you don't think about, well, how does that apply to me? Hopefully everybody brought a big book. I see some of you didn't, which is fine. Because we're going to read a little bit in the book. There's lots of books written on AA history. Lots of things about AA history. The best history book for Alcoholics Anonymous is the book called Alcoholics Anonymous. So we're going to, if you got a book, we're going to read on Roman numeral 18. XVIII. Steve told me that I would start at about 12:30, so we're reading some stuff now just to kill some time. So Alcoholics Anonymous at this point in the book, where we're getting ready to read, is about 10 years old. There's been a lot of growing in the fellowship, a lot of growing pains in the fellowship. Not a whole lot of organization or guidance on what groups should do and shouldn't do. So we'll read this. Now, this is an interesting reading. As we read through it, think about your own life and think if this applies in your own relationships and different things you're involved with. It says, our society, we're at the bottom of the page, our society. Notice he capitalizes society, because Alcoholics Anonymous, whether you like it or not, is a society within a society. I mean, we're basically a subculture of the society we live in. We don't call ourselves a cult because people can come and go as they want to, but we're borderline. But we are a society of alcoholics in action, and we're here to help people. Anyway, got off track there. Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. The test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? Right, so that's a question. You got all these crazy people coming together to help one another, and the question would be, well, are we going to be able to meet and work together? In the book, it talks about where people who normally would not mix. So the question is, when you get people together that normally would not mix, are they going to be able to meet and work together? It's a good question. Will there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? Anybody ever quarrel with anybody over money? Huh? You ever quarrel over somebody in your family on who's going to be in charge? Hey, come on in. Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Would there be schisms which would split AA apart? You ever get into an argument with a friend or a spouse and y'all split apart? Yeah. Soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. But out of this frightening and first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. So basically, the traditions were born out of the experience of the groups. So it wasn't something that just, they just wrote and decided to implement one day. It was the combined experience of a lot of people and a lot of groups, and the combined experience of a lot of mistakes and a lot of successes. Stuff becomes tradition because it has proven to work over a period of time. Right, and so they realized in the mid-40s that they needed something that would help groups to guide them. They needed something to help unify groups so that we all could kind of move in the same direction. They also realized that for an alcoholic, it's really true for any kind of a group that you can't do anything really by yourself. And whatever you were going to do by yourself, it's probably pretty selfish and self-centered. That there's importance in groups, and there's importance in people coming together for common causes or common solutions. And so the traditions were written to help kind of facilitate that. And that really important for an alcoholic to have fellowship and to have somebody they can talk to. That we tend to not do well by ourselves. So it says, as we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live, that's the steps. So we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. So the traditions were written so the groups could survive effectively and could function effectively. Alcoholic doesn't work the 12 steps, they probably won't recover. A group that doesn't follow traditions over time probably won't stay together. So if we want to recover, we should probably work the steps. If we want to stay together, we should probably practice traditions. If we want to get along with people, we've got to practice traditions. So this is the basics of this traditions. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society. Right? So basically, Alcoholics Anonymous can't exclude anybody that wants to get help. We'll talk more about that when we get to the third tradition. So basically, AA as a whole is all-inclusive. That our leaders might serve but never govern. So we do have leaders, contrary to a lot of stuff you hear, but our leaders are servants. They're here to serve, and they're here to help people. They're not governors. They really don't have, we give people titles, but they don't really have any authority over anybody. You'll see sometimes that some people try to have authority over people, but it never really goes well for us. Each group was to be autonomous, and there was to be no professional class of therapy. So basically a group can do what it wants to do. There's no franchise agreement or any specific rules or regulations that a group has to follow. Groups have the freedom to do what they want to do. And that within the fellowship, we don't have any professional therapists or counselors. So basically, we don't get paid to do our 12-step work. There would be no fees or dues. Our expenses will be met by our own voluntary contributions. So basically, we don't have any membership fees. We don't have any membership dues. We have expenses, but those expenses are covered by voluntary contributions. The idea being if we can't cover it by voluntary contributions, then we don't do it. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service centers. David, what's happening, man? Right. Y'all might call him Brian, but his name's David. There was to be the least possible organization, even our service centers. We're not organized like a business. We don't have an org chart. We don't have a board. We've got board of trustees and all that, but they can't tell us what to do. We've got DCMs and GSRs, but they can't tell us what to do. Their job is to basically report information to us. Our public relations will be based upon attraction rather than promotion. It was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films. So basically, our public relations policy is recovered members. That the recovered member living in their community and going to work and back in their family, that is the public relations policy. That the recovered member becomes an attraction. And it says that we're supposed to remain anonymous at press, radio, TV, and films. Not at home, not at work, not in the community, not at the grocery store. Press, radio, TV, and films. So, if you're not involved in press, radio, TV, and films, it's okay for people to know you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You ain't supposed to go out here and start preaching to everybody, but there's nothing wrong with people knowing you're in the program. How are they going to know where to send people for help if they don't know you're sober? And in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies. So here's a good one. So Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't endorse anything. Alcoholics Anonymous has made no alliance with any other organization. And Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't have an opinion on anything that's publicly controversial. We'll talk a lot more about this later, but so as an AA member, I should probably not give an endorsement or make an alliance or enter public controversy. I can do some of that stuff individually, but not as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, this was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 561 of this book. Though none of these principles had the force of rules or laws. So, important note there, that traditions aren't rules or laws. And sometimes we want to treat them that way in groups, or when we see somebody doing something that we don't agree with, and we'll start throwing traditions at them, tell them they're violating the traditions. Been guilty of it. But the reality is that they're not rules or laws. They're really optional, just like steps. You can come in here and hang out and not work the steps if you want to. Nobody's going to force you to do anything or really say much to you. We should treat the traditions the same way. Right? There's no AA police. Sometimes it seems like there should be, but there's not. They had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. Right, so basically the traditions were written 45, 46. They were published in the Grapevine separately. And then Bill Wilson, one of our co-founders, started talking about them, started giving talks about them. And then in 1950, at the first conference that they had in Cleveland, Bill had 6 different AA members from all across the country talk on 2 traditions each. So a guy got up and talked about 2 traditions. Some of y'all may, the talk's out there on the internet. You can read it or listen to it. They're not very good. I mean, it's just basic, simple stuff that these people are talking about. But the idea was that if he could get people from all over the country talking about them, then everybody would buy into them. And literally, when they got done with all 12 of them, he just basically got up and said, "Hey, are you guys okay with confirming these as our traditions?" And evidently, everybody raised their hand, and that was it. It didn't go through a conference process. It didn't go to the group, to the district, to the area, because they didn't have that then. But it was confirmed at that conference. And then, groups started applying them and started to adopt them. So let's look at 561 for a second. We'll entertain a few questions too. Now, we can't get bogged down in questions. We just don't have time. But if anybody's got a real question, happy to try to answer it. If I can't, somebody else might be able to. So you can just raise your hand or jump in. Is it 12:30 yet? That's when I'm really starting. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. All right. We're right on schedule. So let's read this 561 here. It says, "The age tradition, to those now in its fold," that would be us. Yeah. Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety, and often the difference between life and death. So we could ask ourselves that question: Has the program of AA, for me, made the difference between misery and sobriety? Has the program made a difference between life and death? And it may not be a physical death; it could be a spiritual death. I suspect that we all would answer yes to both if we're here. That it has made the difference. It says AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. So that's why it's important for us to stay here. If we've recovered and we've been given a new life, then it's really our responsibility to stay here and pass that on to other people. One of the most selfish things we could do would be to get the gift of sobriety and have a transformed life and then leave and not pass that on to others. It says, "Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone." Right? So we've got to get along with each other. We've got to make sure that we're here and that we're staying somewhat unified to help the next alcoholic that needs it. You think about if somebody had done that, if people hadn't been doing this, we wouldn't be here. Right? 50 years ago, if they said, "Screw traditions, we're going to do what we want to do," and it fell apart, then we wouldn't be sober. We wouldn't be here today. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, or we A's, believe the best answer that our experience has yet given to these ever-urgent questions. How can AA best function? And how can AA best stay whole and so survive? We could start personalizing that. So how can I best function as a member of society? You really can't do it on steps alone. There's not enough instructions on it. How can I best stay whole and survive spiritually? Probably adhere to the traditions. On the next page, A's 12 traditions are seen in their so-called short form, the form in general use today. This is a condensed version of the original long form. A Traditions is first printed in 1946. Because the long form is more explicit and of possible historic value, it is also reproduced. Right? So basically, the long form was written first. So if you really want to know the intent, or kind of the original idea behind traditions, you got to look at the long form. Right? The short form is what this refers to as a condensed version. You sometimes lose translation when you start condensing stuff or cliff noting stuff or shortening stuff. So we're going to look at the long form. Anybody got a question before we move on? All right. So as we go through this for the next little while, start thinking about, because the tradition uses certain terms, Alcoholics Anonymous and group. You can start kind of thinking about your own groups and your own lives and what things that you're involved with, and see how this stuff applies. And I'm going to do something a little different. We're going to start with number 12. I'm keeping an open mind with myself. And I know going to the last one is probably completely contrary to what we normally do and what we teach. But this came to me in morning meditation this morning about 4 a.m. So let's read number 12. Is at the very bottom of 565, where it starts. It says, and finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we're actually to practice a genuine humility, this to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. So if we've worked the first 9 steps of the program and have come into a relationship with a power greater than ourselves and have identified those things that block us off and the things that we need to give to God in order to stay sober and be relieved of the obsession and try to live differently, and we've started making amends, then as the steps are written, the next thing for us to do as we live our lives sober is to continue to look at ourselves. Not at other people, not at groups of people, not at the government, not at places of business. I'm supposed to take inventory of myself. And I'm supposed to try to grow my contact with God as I understand God. And then I'm supposed to, in the 12th step, practice principles in all my affairs. So the question I always ask myself is, well, so if I'm going to keep looking at myself and working on and asking God to correct the deficiencies in me, then that takes the focus off other people. And if I'm going to try to practice principles in all my affairs, that means that I'm taking God with me in everything that I do, or I'm supposed to be, and that I'm trying to apply principles. So instead of being dishonest and sarcastic and ill-tempered, I'm going to try to be loving and kind and tolerant and gentle with people. And so the question is, how do I do that? There's a lot of instructions in the steps on kind of how to do that, but for me, there's way more utility and kind of guidance in the traditions on how to do that. And the 12th step, where it talks about practicing principles in all our affairs, ties right into the 12th tradition. The 12th tradition tells me that I should try to place principles before personalities. What that means is my personality. There's nothing wrong with your personality. If I believe the decision that I made in the 3rd step, that I'm giving up the management of my life and I'm giving up the management of your life, then there's nothing wrong with you. Now, don't misunderstand me. There's a lot wrong with all of you. But that ain't none of my business. I can't. I can't. If I look at it that way, then all I do is point fingers at people, right? I'm supposed to look at myself and believe that everything out here is just the way that it's supposed to be. And I can either go along with that or I can fight it and reject it. And so the 12th tradition tells me that I should place principles before my personality. That my own selfishness and self-centeredness and my own fear and my judgment of people and the self-righteousness that I have and the idea that I'm smarter than everybody else and know more than everybody else, these are all things that I've felt today. That's got to be tempered. And so the question would be, how do I do that? The short form of the tradition says that anonymity is kind of the spiritual foundation of all the traditions. And anonymity means it's really a fancy word for being humble and practicing humility and not taking credit for stuff and trying to do things just nice and quiet. Try to keep things simple. So the way this tells me to do that is that I should try to be grateful in all things. And that I should remember that prior to getting sober, I didn't have anything. My life was terrible. I was walking down Old Fairground Road with nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then I'm given a good life after taking some simple actions. And the good life that I was given is all a direct result of the foundation that was created in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that I should remember that without the program and without God, I'm nothing. I've got nothing. And the 12th tradition tells me that I should constantly be grateful for that and practice humility. The way that we do that is through the first 11 traditions. So I wanted to kind of get to this one first because the other 11 traditions really teach us how to practice humility. They teach us how to get along with others. They teach us how to be grateful. It teaches us to be right-sized and to not think that we're the governor of anything or greater than anybody else. So let's so as we go through the next 11, let's think about the idea of being humble, the idea of being grateful, and the idea of practicing a principle before my personality. It really, if you think about practicing principles before personalities, and you think about practicing principles in all your affairs, this is just a personal thing. Both of those go back to step 6 and 7. That hundreds of times throughout the day, I'm given a decision, I'm given a choice. I can either act out on a defect or I can act out on a principle. Right? I can either do the wrong thing or I can do the right thing. I'm a guy that I love the analogy of the devil and the angel on your shoulder. And every day it's a constant decision of, am I going to act out on what the devil's telling me to do or what the angel's telling me to do? And best I know, I got about a millisecond to make the right or the wrong decision. And so that's why it's important to keep that contact with God. And try to bring God or that principle into every decision. So that both of those, that step and that tradition to me kind of, it's kind of a guide of how well I'm practicing step 6 and 7. The first tradition in our program talks about unity, and the long form talks about we're just a small part of a great whole. And I don't know about anybody else, but my own experience is that I'm always a guy that I either feel less than or greater than you, depending on the situation. And especially prior to getting sober, I typically lean on the side of less than, right? Everybody's better than me until I get a little whiskey in me and some burger sugar, and then I'm better than everybody else, right? And I would just, depending on the day and stuff, I would just flounder back and forth on, what was going on. And the first tradition tells me that I'm just a small part of a great whole. And that it really kind of sets the foundation of, do I really want to be like a peacemaker? Do I really want to get along with people? Do I really want to just be a one among many? Or do I want to be divisive and be sarcastic, be vindictive? Because a lot of times that stuff feels good, but long term it doesn't do much for us. So the first tradition is really, for me, it's talking about I got to get out of myself and start thinking about what's best for other people. And if you think about different groups you're involved with, it could be your family, right? That's a group. It could be where you work. That's a group. It could be your church. That's a group. It could be community involvement. If you're involved in other stuff, it could be your AA group. The question would be, do I want to do what's best for them, or do I just want to continue to do what's best for me? And act like a little 3-year-old kid and suck on my thumb, which I like doing sometimes. And the concept on the first and second one, really the first and second tradition for me is, if I do what's best for my family, that ultimately ends up being what's best for me. And sometimes I got to lay aside my own personal ambition. And my own personal desire for what's best for somebody else. And that ultimately I'm the one that benefits for that. So the common welfare of this group should override my own personal ambition or desire. Right? And you could probably think of some examples of your own of where you may have done that. The second tradition talks about, it says, for a group purposes but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. So the first thing that tells me is that I'm not in charge. Right? I sometimes want to think I'm in charge. But if I'm going to try to follow this tells me that a loving God should be in charge. So it's a question I constantly ask myself. Do I really believe that there's a loving God in charge of stuff. Am I willing to actually believe that? Am I willing to let a loving God direct my thoughts and actions? If you think about, like, if you've been involved in AA groups and been involved in business meetings, and they start talking about a divisive or a controversial issue, right? Everybody always gets down to where I'm right and you're wrong. And if we're going to follow the second tradition, the most important principle of the second tradition is the ability to listen. And that I gotta lay aside what I think's right on that issue and listen for other people, listen for more information, make sure I'm well informed on things before I just start going off half-cocked. Make sure I have all the facts and figures. And a lot of times, if I can listen to people, I'll learn new stuff, right? And so, on a personal level, what that would look like is that now I'm a guy who I think I know a lot of stuff, and you can come to me and start talking to me, and while you're talking about your problem or your question, I'm filtering through in my mind my own experience and my own response, and I'm going to hit you with some real powerful stuff when you're done. Well, I'm so busy thinking about how I'm going to respond, I'm really not listening to what you're asking or what you're saying. And that can happen in a business meeting. I'm so convicted on what I know is right and what I believe, I'm not listening to reason or other people's ideas. And so what the second tradition is taught me is to try to listen to people and to try to what's that? The prayer in 12 and 12 that Saint Francis, that one. That's second tradition, right? It's telling us to seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? So that means I should try to listen without rebuttal or listen without any kind of comeback. I should try to understand what people are saying, and that I should listen for God in people. Because, right, God can speak to us through lots of different ways. And a lot of times the true voice of God or some new information will come through listen to people talk. But if I don't listen, I'm not going to be able to hear you. And a lot of times when people come and talk to you, they don't even want you to answer them. They just want you to listen to them. Right? I mean, but we're good at giving answers. So, I mean, that's just, one of the things that I think I've told this story before about. It's a true story. I'd gone to the grocery store one time and bought a bunch of groceries, but part of the groceries was a bag of potato chips. And my wife opened up the potato chips, and she ate a few of them, and she said, "These potato chips are stale." That's all she said. What I heard was, "You are a dumb SOB. How could you buy these stale potato chips?" Right? That's what I heard. And now that is not what she said. She just said, "These potato chips are stale." And man, I let it rip. I'm like, what? Go buy your own damn potato chips next time. And you ever done anything like that? Yeah. And when I got done with my tirade, she just simply looked at me and said, "All I said was there was some stale potato chips. I didn't blame you. I know it wasn't your fault." And I mean, it hit me like, my God, my inability to listen and actually just hear the truth about what people are saying is just, it's distorted, man. So that's kind of what, to me is kind of in line with that tradition, that I should start trying to be a better listener. And I should try to seek first to really understand what somebody's saying before I respond. To try to listen to God and people. And it really kind of ties in with number one. If I'm doing that, and I'm trying to do what's best for others, and I'm trying to do what's best for a group, then I can't do that unless I'm listening to people. And if you think about it, we all of us probably make decisions every day that impact somebody else. And the tradition teaches me that I should think through those decisions and how what the long-term impact of somebody is before I make it. And the fourth tradition will tell us that maybe we should talk to them before we actually make those decisions. But power with people is way better than power over people. I'll tell you another experience. I don't know why this just popped in my head, but I think it's in line with this one. So the ability to let people make their own decisions and to do what's best for a group. For years now, I've been involved in this family beach trip. And every year we go through this exercise of what house to rent. And you've got 6 or 7, 8 people. Now some of the nieces have gotten older. There's 10, 12, 15 people involved in trying to make a damn decision. And they can't make a decision. It used to be worse, but what would happen is that people would start putting input on what they wanted to do. And so there were different levels of contributions people could make towards the house. Some had pets, some didn't. Some had kids, some didn't. And it was always kind of it was tough for people to make decisions. And I would get aggravated because I wanted what I wanted. And for a number of years, and I would just say, screw that. And I'm going to, and I didn't think I was doing this at the time, but I evaluated this just this morning, and I know now this is what I was doing. I would just throw all the money in and say, screw y'all, I'm renting this house, and y'all just come. And in my mind, I'm like, look at this great thing I've done for the family. Everybody can come. And now that didn't take into account the common welfare of the group. So basically what I've done is people actually wanted to contribute what they could. I didn't let them. People actually wanted to have some say-so on whether they were going to be on the beach and have a hot tub and a pool or whether they were going to be a block off. People actually wanted to have a say-so on where it was at in the relation of the stuff. But because of my big shotism and my inability to let people negotiate, I stopped all that by playing the big shot, showing how much how much money I could put down, and I'll make the decision. And so that had nothing to do with the common welfare of the group, and it had nothing to do with listening to what people really wanted. So I stopped doing it. So now everybody goes back to the debate about what they're going to get, and the last 3 or 4 years they've gotten a house that I would have never thought about buying or renting, but it's worked out just fine. So now that, because people contribute what they can, people have input on what they have, and so most people are happy with the house that they're getting because they've all had some input in it. But that's an example of where, man, I'm just going to shut this down, and people just have to deal with it. But in the back of my mind, I think I'm doing something good. Yeah, because I'm a little smarter and wiser than everybody else, and then I just take the responsibility off and the burden off of them, right? So don't do that. The tradition teaches us and it's really not a big deal. Three talks about our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. We may refuse none who wish to recover, nor should membership depend upon money or conformity. So, Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't exclude anybody, assuming you got an alcohol problem. So we're all inclusive, but the reality is we're actually pretty exclusive because we only really allow alcoholics to be members. But the idea behind the tradition is that, hey, if you got an alcohol problem, or you think you got an alcohol problem, you can be a member, regardless of any other problem you have. Doesn't matter what color you are, what your religion is, doesn't matter what your sexual preference is, doesn't matter what your lifestyle is, doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, convict, choir boy. I mean, it doesn't matter. That we welcome everybody. And so there's a lot to learn from that, personally, for me, because I grew up. I mean, I come from a long line of I guess you could call them they're prejudiced towards certain people. I mean, I guess nowadays they would be called racist. Right? They're against certain lifestyles. And if I'm going to try to practice the third tradition in my personal life, number one, as an AA member, it tells me that I should try to help anybody that wants help. That I shouldn't pick and choose who I try to help. I shouldn't try to search out a certain type of individual to help or to sponsor. If God sends somebody to me, I should try to help them in some way, shape, or form, regardless of who they are. That I should, even if I've got deep-seated values or principles or even religious beliefs, to help somebody, I should lay that aside. Outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, what the tradition has really helped me with is the ability to be more welcoming to people and to lay aside some of those old ideas that were kind of instilled in me as a kid. And if I go back to just the steps and the principles and the steps of trying to be honest and to be loving and to be tolerant and compassionate, and go back to the second tradition of a loving God. Well, if I believe that a loving God is guiding my life, and I'm going to allow a loving God to guide my life, then as a human, I should probably try to help everybody and to be open-minded to whatever anybody's beliefs are. And the best way that I've been able to practice that is basically with my family, and in a family where a lot of the nieces and nephews have decided to take on partners that ain't white. A lot of our family doesn't like that. Right? We've got folks that have taken on different lifestyles. A lot of family don't like that. And then a lot of times when people get together, they want to talk about it and they want to use certain slurs or racist comments. And I personally don't participate in that anymore. That's kind of how I practice the tradition. Is that I love those people just the way they are. I'm not trying to. There might be something inside me that wishes that they would make different decisions, but I don't impose that on people, and I try to welcome them and help them any way that I can. And when I first started not participating in those discussions with certain friends and family, it almost just shut the discussion down. I mean, it's hard for them to have that discussion and to say that stuff if there ain't nobody listening to it. So it's just one example of how I've taken that tradition. Hey, come on in. And have taken it to the streets and tried to really to apply it. I was sober, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and was going into a prison in Harnett County in Lillington, and a guy asked me to sponsor him, and he was a African American Muslim, and at least in the early 90s, my exposure to that was very limited, and I had a lot of ideas about all that. And because of this tradition, I helped the guy. I sponsored him, did the steps with him. We had way different beliefs on stuff, but I was able to take him through the steps, and the guy's still sober, as far as I know. He got out of prison eventually and moved off to another part of the state. But had I been following kind of the upbringing, I would have never helped that guy. Right? This tradition taught me how to do that. In stupid story, but when I worked at Alltel in the early 90s, and there were I was one of the first guys that hired a female installer to install telephones. I also hired a African American female as a sales manager in Eastern North Carolina. And I can remember and all of it was because of what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I can remember when I started making those decisions, folks above me, even some folks in so-called HR departments back then that are supposed to be trying to protect people and help people, all of them were questioning it. I don't know if it's wise to send a black female out to East North Carolina. I'm like, well, she's the most qualified person for the job. I mean, why wouldn't you? And so I got questioned on it. But this tradition and other things I'd learned in Alcoholics Anonymous taught me that, hey, that you got to lay all that stuff aside. I mean, if you're going to keep living in that way, then it ain't going to work. But so what this tells me is that, what's that old saying? Don't judge a book by its cover. Pretty accurate, right? I mean, if I go by people just on their first appearance, and I start judging them, and I shut down or I limit how I'm going to deal with them, then I'm the one that loses. And we've all done it. I mean, we've probably done it here this morning. We've seen somebody that we don't know, and we start getting ideas, right? Right? The first time I saw Randy back there a long, long time ago, he looked like the meanest dude I'd ever seen. And when you get to know him, he's the nicest guy in the world. Now, he's a tough dude. Don't misunderstand, but he's a nice guy. But that's an example where you see people and you form opinions of them. Well, this tells me that I shouldn't do that. Right? Get to know more about the person before you start passing. But don't pass any judgment on them. But the same freedom that AA gives the individual to recover, I should give that same freedom to people in my life. Ford talks about, with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups, those groups ought to be consulted. It's one of the best traditions to think about in your personal life. Right? So Alcoholics Anonymous basically tells the group, hey, there's no authority over you. You can do whatever you want to do, The only thing you're responsible to is the group conscience in the second tradition. So whatever that group's conscience is, the group can do that unless what you do is going to impact another group. And if what you're going to do is going to impact another group, then you should consult with them first. So this is another one. If you're not practicing tradition 1 and 2, then you won't care anything about 4. Right? So 4 is kind of the evidence of am I actually doing 1 and 2? So if you think about it, Alcoholics Anonymous gives a lot of freedom to the group and the individual. But also with that comes a lot of responsibility. So AA is saying, hey, we're not scared you're going to hurt us. Right? You do, we've got enough faith that you ain't going to hurt us. But if you think you're going to do something that hurts us, talk to us first. So there's a lot of freedom in that, but there's a responsibility to kind of do things by principle. So, what this one has really kind of taught me personally is that I should, like I talked about in the first one, if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact Steve, I probably should talk to him first. If I'm going to do something major that's going to impact my family, like if I was going to make a decision to just quit my job and go off and be a monk in Kentucky, which I've considered actually years ago, I probably should a monk in Kentucky, a monk in Kentucky. Yeah. There's a monastery in Kentucky. If I'm going to spend a bunch of money on something, I probably should talk to my wife about it before I do it. I've got a business partner. If I'm going to do something that's going to affect that business, or if I'm going to, decide to do some crazy advertising on Twitter and Facebook, or I'm going to pull money out of an account to buy something, then I probably should talk to her before I do that. So it's really about having respect for other people, right? It's about being a good neighbor. I lived in a house in Andrew one time. We were going to do a bunch of landscaping down the side of the yard. It bordered the neighbor. Now I know this is a stretch for some people, but I was trying to practice the 4th tradition. I talked to him before I did the landscaping, just to let him know what I was going to do. Did he have any problems with it? Now I'm wondering if he actually said, "Yeah, you can't." I wonder if I would have not done it. I'm not sure, to be honest about it. But I did talk to him about it, and I asked him about it before I did it. That's being a good neighbor. That's that's kind of what the 4th tradition is talking about. That certainly I could have just done it and said, "The heck with you, you deal with it," but not in the spirit of what this is. The other thing that this one has done for me is, I'm a guy. I think I know a lot of stuff, and I think I've got a lot of cool experience with life, and that I can help you avoid making mistakes and help you avoid doing certain things just by sharing my wisdom with you. And the 4th tradition, it's really how the traditions came about was that the AA said, "You guys do what you want to do." So they gave groups and AA members the freedom to make mistakes. They give the groups freedom to have their own experience. And so I should extend that on to my family, brothers, sisters, my wife, nieces and nephews. If somebody comes and asks me a question, certainly I'm going to ask it. But to start giving advice and wisdom to people when they ain't asking for it, that just sets me up for trouble and sets me up for conflict. So this is kind of giving me the ability or the idea of, hey, let's let people have their own experience. People need to make their own mistakes so that they can learn things. And I don't always have to jump in and save people, right? And if you're asking, I should try to help you. But if you ain't asking, I should, let people have their own experience. Let them have their own road, right, Brian? Get out there like that. How do you think we're doing on time? Then we're right on schedule. Right on schedule. Anybody got a question? All right. Yeah, it also kind of means, I shouldn't try to have authority over people. AA doesn't have authority over anybody. But I certainly thought I had authority over my first wife. I did. Right? She was mine, my possession. I didn't say it that way, but in my mind, that's what I thought, and that she should do exactly what I wanted to do. Right? So when I'm at home or at work, the idea that I've got authority over people and I'm going to kind of express that authority to people, over people, all that does is set up conflict, sets up probably a fight or an argument. And I got to remind myself of that third step decision that I gave up that management of other people's lives. I even done this with my parents for the first 7 years I was sober. I'd go visit, and I'd have these ideas about how things were going to go, and they wouldn't go that way, and then I'm kind of manipulating the situation and trying to tell them what they need to be doing, and in my mind I would just get so twisted up that they should be better than they are, they should be further along, they should be something that they're not. And these first 4 traditions really taught me that parents are who they are. The idea that I'm going to be able to change them now, all I'm doing is setting myself up to be hurt. I'm setting myself up for conflict. And I shouldn't even try to have authority over them. Right? They're who they are. They need as much freedom as I do. I should love and respect them for who they are. 5 talks about each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So an AA group should be, this is one of the best traditions for the group. It says the group should be a spiritual entity. So if you think about a spiritual entity, that's probably, we could look that up. I don't have a dictionary on me. But that's probably a place where people feel safe. It's probably a place that encourages your spirit to come alive. It's probably a place where there's some excitement in the air. It's probably a place that protects people and that it helps them to actually recover. And that a group, an AA group, should have one purpose: to help an alcoholic. So in the AA group, I should not be there to get a job. I should not be there looking for a date. Right? I should not be there trying to find a counselor. I should not be there trying to find a place to live. Now, if I go to a group for the right reasons, I may get all that. Indirectly. But that should not be the purpose of why I'm there. That I should be there to try to help another alcoholic. And that should be the sole purpose of the group. Right? The sole purpose of the group is not to have a bake sale and sell T-shirts and have dances. No, they may do all that stuff. Hopefully not. But the group exists to provide an atmosphere where healing and recovery can take place. And that we've got that one purpose to help an alcoholic. We're not there to sell turkeys for Thanksgiving. And that just happened last week. Yep.
There is a solution.
No. So on the fifth tradition, if you think about all the different groups that we're involved in, that we've got lots of different purposes. So your purpose may be to be a dad. Your purpose might be to be a mother. Your purpose might be to be a husband or a wife. Your purpose might be to be a painter or a computer programmer or an attorney or whatever it is, wherever you're at. That when this is it's probably one of the biggest traditions that helped me in like business and at work, is that when I'm at work, my primary purpose should be to do the job that they ask me to do. That my primary purpose should be to do the job that they pay me to do. And there's, with all the distractions in the world and all the things going on, it's easy to get off track. Right? So when I actually worked for a company, it was important for me to do the job that they pay me to do and to stay away from all the break room gossip and all of the shucking and jiving out back. And I remember one time I had this like spiritual experience. I'm out back smoking cigarettes with the guys, right? We're sitting there talking crap about the people in the main office. Now keep in mind, we don't even know who the people in the main office are. But we're talking about what they're doing, and the man's out to get us, and they ain't paying us enough, and they're making all these decisions, and I just popped out of it because of steps and good sponsorship and traditions. I'm like, man, none of that stuff's even true. We're just sitting here making it up because it just makes us feel better. Right? I mean, it was just an absolutely immature, entitled kind of response to stuff. And, I realized at that time, I think a couple of days after that, I quit smoking cigarettes. Not because of that, but I realized that I could either be part of the problem or part of the solution. Right? We learned that in Alcoholics Anonymous. But that it was silly for me to make comments that are not based in any fact, to gossip, and they're paying us to do something, and we're basically stealing time from the business is what we were doing. And I started looking at things different. Not long after that, got honest about stealing all that money from them and stuff. But it's important for me personally to have a mission, right? And I should have a kind of a personal mission for myself of how I want to live. And it's important for me to stick to a few things. And that's kind of what AA has done, right? AA is stuck to helping alcoholics. And you could debate it all you want to, but they've been pretty successful at it. Right? I know some of us think we've got problems and all that, but Alcoholics Anonymous has done very good at helping alcoholics. Because they've stuck to that. They've not, so far as we know today, they've not gotten off track with focusing on helping alcoholics. So if I can garner that same energy towards being a good husband. When I'm at home, if I can stick to my purpose of being at home and focus on being a good husband and not constantly getting distracted by the computer and Facebook and the phone buzzing, all that's going to happen. But I shouldn't allow it to happen the whole time. And if I'm at work and they're paying me to paint the wall, I should probably paint the wall and not paint the door or paint somebody's car or scrolling back page or whatever it is that people still using back page. You guys don't know what it is. That's a good thing. Snapchatter or Twitters. I love TikTok. Yeah, so stick to a few things. Another way this ties into a personal thing is so I've got written ideals about my life. Like I've got an ideal about my job. I got an ideal about being a husband. I got an ideal about being an AA member. And I try to review those and ask God to help me to live up to them. And so this tradition lines right up with that. Is that I want to try to be the best husband I can be. I want to try to be the best AA member I can be. I want to try to be the best business owner that I can be. And if I've gotten an ideal or kind of a vision or mission written out for each of those, then that's how I try to focus my time on. And it helps me to not be distracted, because we love jumping at the next shiny thing. This one's going to be better. This is better. And we jump. And what happens is we spin tires and get nothing done. So the fifth tradition, if I can stick to it, then I can be really effective at doing a few things. It also helps me to, kind of like the 12th tradition, these other traditions, I can ask myself, do my ideals and do my actions line up with the idea of principles for personalities and what my primary purpose is, which ultimately should be to serve God. And the question is, do my actions line up with actually serving God? Serving that loving God? And the answer is not always. All right, let's talk about 6 and then we'll break. No, you know what? Let's take a break right now. Yeah, we'll break for about 15, 20 minutes. Everybody ready? We missing anybody?
David, he might be swimming. There's crazy woman.
All right. Hey, let's sit quiet just for a second and kind of just get centered. All right, thank you. If we pick back up on 5, there's it talks about primary purpose. There's a good description of that on page 77 in the book. If you got a book. about 3 lines down, it says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Yeah. So basically, we can kind of use that as a guide for the rest of those traditions. If you notice it says we got to fit ourselves, that means that I got to change and mold and do what I've got to do to be of maximum service to God and to maximum service to people about us. And this is obviously in the 9th step in the book. So we're supposed to be of service to God and to all people. Now we're uniquely qualified to help an alcoholic, but that shouldn't be our only work. Our purpose is to be of service to all God's kids, all of God's creation, not just the alcoholic. So again, we could start using that as kind of a guide as we go through the rest of the traditions, or all of them, that, hey, is what I'm doing lining up with being of service to God and being of maximum service to other people? So our spiritual aim should be to serve God and serve other people. Number 6, back on 563 now. My favorite one. I say that about a lot of stuff, don't I? The problems. I think I just realized that. Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. So Alcoholics Anonymous purposely tries to avoid disputes over money. They purposely don't own property. They purposely don't. Well, they've got a big prudent reserve, but they don't hoard or accumulate money for no unstated purpose, and they don't have any authority over any of us. So they do that on purpose, so as long as humans have been on the earth, humans have argued over material things. They've argued over who's going to be in charge, and they all argue over money, property, and they'll argue over who's going to get recognition. And if Alcoholics Anonymous was to do that, that diverts them from their primary aim of helping an alcoholic. So if I'm going to take this one to a personal level, I should ask myself this: anything that diverts me from being of maximum service to God, anything that diverts me from being of maximum service to the people around me, I should probably look at that and stop doing it. Now, if you think about it, everybody, unless you're just extremely brand new, but you either have your own experience with this or you've seen it happen for other people. I'm going to talk about how it relates to an AA member. So many of us will get sober. We're completely willing when we first get here to do a lot of stuff to recover and to get connected and to form a relationship with God and with a fellowship. And then slowly over time we let the job divert us from growing spiritually. The way that would look like is, boy, I worked hard today. I probably don't need to go meet that guy that I promised I'd meet. Boy, I'm tired. Don't need to go to that home group tonight. Man, I'm tired. I woke up late. Don't need to pray or connect with God this morning. Just scramble off to school. Don't need to read the book anymore or read that book anymore. Boy, this new relationship I'm in, boy, I really like her. I know that she really likes watching Jeopardy on Tuesday nights.
Too soon.
Yeah. I think I'll stay home and watch Jeopardy tonight.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Or and then what happens is, right, that stuff becomes so important that we, right, leads to the obsession coming back and relapse, or just a kind of a miserable existence. And anybody ever seen that happen or done that? Yeah. So what this one tells us is that, as it relates to that I shouldn't let stuff get in the way of my spiritual aim. And a lot of times we hear people talk about this, that all they associate with is meetings. I'm not talking about just going to meetings. I'm talking about growing spiritually. So there's lots of stuff that I got to do to grow spiritually. And there's a lot of stuff I got to do if I'm going to be of maximum service to God and the people around me. And it's a whole kind of pie of stuff. Right? It's meditation, it's prayer, it's reading spiritual literature, could be membership in a church. Right? It's staying current with a sponsor, it's staying current in a group, it's trying to find an avenue of service outside of my group. And it could be doing something out in the community. It could be continuously taking an inventory and making sure that I'm on track and trying to grow closer to God. So anything that stops me or diverts me from doing that, I probably should look at that and stop doing it. And that, it's like I said earlier, right? Everything I've been given in my life is a result of Alcoholics Anonymous and the power that I found here. So the busier I get, the more spiritual work I should do, not less. The more gifts and blessings I get from life, the more spiritual activity I should do, not less. And I know that's kind of contradictory or inconsistent with just normal logic. But right, the better my life gets, the more spiritual stuff I should do. Not the opposite. And I'm a guy that has I've had a good life since I've gotten sober. I've had lots of blessings and lots of gifts given to me. And for me, I always see that as a result of being a member of AA. I mean, I've been able to, like many of us, I've had an incredible business career. I've had restored relationships with family that I never thought would be possible. I've been able to experience some really cool stuff in life, been able to go to some cool places, hang out with cool people, and been able to travel all over the place, and all that stuff is great. I've been able to experience some incredible things with different spiritual teachings and spiritual ways, and All of that is because of my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. All that is because of simple actions that I've been taught to take. And hey, if I had never taken the simple actions, I would have never had that stuff. So the foundation of me being a member of AA and trying to uniquely help people in Alcoholics Anonymous and to practice those simple kind of actions of communicating and keeping that contact with God daily should be the number one priority in my life. And from that stems everything else. Right? So I'm a better family. I'm a better member of my family because of my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a better employee or employer because of my membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? I'm a better member of the community because of stuff that I've been taught in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, I mean, I kind of look at this almost on a daily basis. Am I doing something that diverts me from that mission of trying to be of service? And that can come in a lot of different forms. Especially if you like the internet, where it really diverts you. So, hey, nothing wrong with having a big job, nothing wrong with being in a great relationship. I think sometimes when people hear you talk like that, that's what they're saying, or you can't do anything, or that's not true. You can be rich and famous, still be spiritual. Right? You can be in a great committed relationship, have a crap load of kids, and have a cool job, and still be spiritual and be a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're not inconsistent with one another. And my experience is that there's time for everything. And that if I just show up where I'm supposed to show up and honor a commitment, I'm given the power and I'm given the time. I don't have to manage that. Doesn't mean it doesn't get stressful and you get crazy as hell sometimes and run around like a chicken with your head cut off. That'll happen. But it still gets done. So 6 also has kind of taught me that I shouldn't make commitments that I can't honor. I still do it from time to time, but if I make a commitment to somebody, I should try to honor that. I think for me, it's the number one reason why people relapse and why we lose members is that they get other stuff becomes more important to them. And I'm pretty grateful that you see it sometimes with people that they think there's got to be more, or that they'll get involved in other stuff and they think that all of a sudden is a priority, or it's more important, or it's more spiritual than being an Alcoholics Anonymous. And they just kind of disappear. And my experience has been that I've got more opportunities in my own community and in my own group to help one of God's kids than anything else I could ever think about doing. I don't need to go to Haiti or Barbados. There's nothing wrong with that, to help somebody. I got people in my own backyard. I'm given more opportunities to actually help a person's life and transform their lives right there in my own group than I would in any other organization. Doesn't mean I shouldn't be involved in other organizations, but that should be an add-on to my primary purpose. I talked to a guy. I guess it was about 6 months ago. It might have been a little longer than that. And he had left Alcoholics Anonymous. He'd been gone for about 9 months. And I called him up and asked him if he could meet me for coffee. And we had a conversation. He went on to tell me how that he had gotten involved in this church, and that the church was helping him, and it was more important, and that he had joined there because he really believed in their teachings, and that he saw as an avenue to really be of service to people. And I'm not making this story up; it's 100% accurate. And that he was going to really help people in that church. He'd been a member of it for 9 months at this point. And he got done talking, and kind of talked about how he implied that was way more spiritual than Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I just simply asked him the question. I said, how many people have you helped? He turned white as a ghost. Then he got red, and then you could see light bulbs popping up in his head. And you know what his answer was? None. None. I said, so, how many opportunities have you had to help somebody one-on-one? You're none. I'm like, okay. And probably a worthless story, but hell, he could have helped 10, 15, 20 people in the group there over those last 9 months, right? Could have probably gone into a treatment center or a detox, help people. So a lot of times, what's Bill Wilson said, the good is the enemy of the best. Things aren't always what they appear to be, and he could have easily been helping alcoholics while he was an exemplary member of that church. He couldn't do both. Number 7, talks about groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. So, group. Now, we'll need to, since Steve passed that basket twice, we probably should, somebody other than his wife should probably count that money and make sure that they're not. I suspect they collected more than they're going to spend, so we want to make sure.
We can only hope.
I'm joking.
Somebody got to buy dinner.
But you're buying everybody dinner? Hey, look, there's 30 people going down instead of 15.
That's why we call him Lord Steve, that's right.
Right, so a group is self-supported. Right, an AA group shouldn't take contributions from non-members. They shouldn't take contributions from outside organizations. They shouldn't take contributions from the community or the government. That they're self-supporting. So groups have decided to not take handouts. Groups have decided to not take charitable contributions from other organizations. Mainly because they don't want to be bound to them, right? So a lot of times, whoever pays the piper calls the tune, right? So if somebody was to give us a lot of money, then they basically can have some kind of influence and control over it. Especially if you get accustomed to having that, right? Over time, they can kind of tell you what to do or what not to do. This is another one that really kind of applies probably to all of us when we get sober. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I was a guy who loved other people paying for stuff for me. I felt entitled and thought that my parents should take care of this and take care of that. In-laws should take care of this and all that because I'm letting your daughter stay in this house. right? But I was always kind of, looking for a handout and was entitled, thinking that people should take care of stuff for me. And I was rarely completely paid my own way or was self-supporting. And even if I could have been, I wouldn't have been. So the seventh tradition, personally, is, I mean, it teaches me or tells me that, hey, I should probably start being responsible with money, and that I should probably start paying my own way. And a lot of times for us, it comes kind of the first evidence of it is putting money in the basket at the home group, right? Again, when I got sober, I was told, hey, you need to put money in that basket. That's more important than buying cigarettes. And of course, back then we didn't go to coffee shops because I don't know if there were really any real coffee shops. We might stop at the damn T-Mart done and buy a cup of coffee, but you didn't spend money on stuff that you couldn't afford, and it was important to put money in the basket, even if it was just a quarter. That the action of giving was more important than the amount. And that's kind of how I first learned to be self-supporting. But through good sponsorship, over time, I learned that I had to lose my dependency on my parents. I needed to lose my dependency on my in-laws. That I needed to stop manipulating. And heck, I'd give them to pay for stuff even when I had money. Right? I mean, it was crazy. And so what happened to me was I slowly over time, I stopped expecting people to take care of me. That I started to learn to pay my own way. And it took me a while to understand the importance of living below my means, right? And I don't know about anybody else, but I've gone through periods of spending money and running up credit card debt, paying off credit card debt, and running back up credit card debt, and then paying off credit card debt, taking out a loan to do this, and then a loan to do that, and then anybody ever done that? And go through that scramble. This tradition, particularly over time, I learned how to have a better relationship with money and truly live within or below my means. And I've told this story before, but when I got divorced, after I got divorced, and when me and Sarah got married, I brought a crap load of baggage, especially financial, into that marriage, and was in terrible debt, and mostly like credit card and loan type stuff. And me and her prayed about it and wrote out a plan. And a lot of times you get in that debt, you don't think you're ever going to get out of it. Sometimes you look on paper and you look at how long you're going to work and how much you make, and I'll die before it gets paid off. You've done that, huh? And you know what? We put a plan out on paper and prayed about it, and what looked like it was going to take a lifetime, in a few years we were out of debt. I think by bringing God into it and trying to just take some different actions of not being crazy and insane with money and overspending. But for me, that lines up with this tradition of trying to be self-supporting, not doing things that I can't afford, and what happened to me was I kind of lost my fear of not having enough. I stole money from work because I was afraid I wasn't going to have enough money. And so I started to have more of a healthy relationship with money. And now since then, I've made a lot of money. I've lost a lot of money. I've been well off. I've been on unemployment, well off again. But I'm not in any debt because of this tradition. And the other thing, I remember the very first time that I was barely sober, but I'm a guy that it was always my dad and my mom's responsibility to pay for stuff. If I got in trouble, they had to pay for it. And a big thing for me, for some reason, was anytime there was like a car problem, man, Dad, you got to take care of this for me. You got to pay for this. I had that old beat up 82 Grand Prix that Shaggy sold me for $200. And it's the same one I set on the exhaust pipe up for a while and tried to kill myself, but it needed some tires on it. And I remember I took that thing to the tire shop. The sponsor told me, don't talk to your dad. Go take that thing and get some new tires on it. And I know it's kind of trivial, but I remember paying for them tires and driving away from there. It was like one of the first times I ever actually did something. Paid for it all on my own and didn't tell anybody about it. Right? I just bought the tires. I think I gave the guy about a daggone $40 tip for doing nothing because I was so excited about actually having some money to pay for it. And ever since that time, even being in trouble financially off and on throughout the years, I've never asked my parents for anything. I've never once had to go. I could have, but I never had. Because the tradition and people in AA have taught me to be responsible. Now I know that if things really ever got bad, I could do certain things, but I've never had to do that because of actions that I've been taught. It's also taught me not to be lazy and actually show up for work and do what they tell me to do. Number 8 talks about it, and it's also popped in my head was that it's helped me to be charitable too. That Alcoholics Anonymous, you can come in here and you don't have to pay anything. You can participate all you want to. So AA is pretty charitable in that regard, and this tradition has helped me to kind of realize that I've been given a lot of gifts and have been very fortunate, and that I should give back and that I should be charitable. And even times when I wasn't making any money and didn't have any money, and me and Sarah still tried to give money away. And you would think that when the account starts shrinking, and you owe the IRS 6 figures at 20-some years sober, you think you'd start hoarding that money, but you keep giving it away. And it works out. So that's one of the things that Trish's taught me. Number 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or hire. But we may employ alcoholics who are going to perform those services for which we might otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Right, so Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't pay anybody to do 12-step work. Right, so we don't have any professional class of therapy. We don't pay people to be counselors. There are no AA counselors. People like putting that on the business cards nowadays. We don't have any peer support specialists or sober coaches. And so as it comes to 12-step work, we do that for free and for fun because somebody did it for us. Right, so we freely give of our services and of our time for that. One thing that's helped me understand is that if I'm willing to do that here, I might should do that other places. So, I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous is, like we talked earlier, we're a subculture of society, but we also have anything that's in society is in AA. So we got very talented people. We got people with very special skills. We got people with different levels of things. And a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous can be a tremendous asset to a community. Right? And we spend so much time taking from the community. When we get sober, we should give back. So one of the things this has helped me understand is that I should probably give freely my time outside of the program as well. Right? So if there's a cause or an organization that I'm interested in, whether it's at my church or with homelessness or kids or battered women or Salvation Army, that I should give freely my time to those organizations as well. It's kind of part of just giving back to the community that I took from for so long, giving back to society. Now the other thing I've been involved in junior achievement. I taught junior achievement classes to first grade and sixth grade. And I've been involved in helping people homelessness in Wake County. I was involved with the Boys and Girls Club in Cumberland County and helped build some homes there. I couldn't have done that without being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I wasn't sober, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do any of that. I'll tell you something interesting about all that stuff too. I did some stuff with a battered women's shelter that was real kind of clandestine, and because the families, right, the husband was trying to find them, so I've done stuff with kids, with women, with homelessness, and the whole time, all those organizations knew I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. People think you got to hide that, or that it's somehow going to hurt you, or the people, it's the opposite. They knew I was a member of AA. It's never hurt me professionally or personally for people to know I'm a member of AA. Now, the other thing about Alcoholics Anonymous and the Eighth Tradition is that we do hire people and pay them for specific skills. So there's a lot of things that Alcoholics Anonymous does that they can't get volunteers to do. Right? So at GSO, we've got people to manage websites. We've got people to do mailings. We've got people that answer phones. We've got people that do all kinds of stuff like that. At a lot of the bigger central offices or intergroup offices, they have people that they pay to manage offices. Right? So they recognize that you can't always get volunteers to do stuff, nor do volunteers have the specialized skills for certain things, so they'll hire people to do that. Now I know this is a stretch, but so it's taught me in my personal life that if I need legal advice, I probably should hire an attorney. If I need accounting advice, I probably should hire a CPA. If I got a car that is broke and I don't know how to fix it, I probably should hire somebody to fix it before I start tinkering with it. Right? And that there are lots of skilled people out there that I should probably make use of their services and pay them for it. But I'm a guy that thinks I know everything, so I'll start working on stuff, and I'll end up making it worse than it is. Right? So it's okay to actually pay people for services. And I've learned to do that without trying to... I know in some business deals you're going to negotiate and try to work out the best deal you can, but sometimes it's good just to pay people for the job they do and not try to talk them down and to get all kinds of discounts and to get stuff for free. There's lots of terms for that, but you can't say them anymore because people think you're not being politically correct. But, we got to come up with a new term for some of that stuff. All right. Number 9 What's that, Steve? Huh?
He's being politically correct.
Is he?
No. He'll throw some steps at later.
Throw some step work out later. Number 9 says each AA group needs the least possible organization. Rotating leadership is the best. I'm going to go down the last 5 sentences in that long form. If you got a book, it says, all such representatives are to be guided in the spirit of service. For true leaders in AA are but trusted and experienced servants of the whole. They derive no real authority from their titles. They do not govern. Universal respect is the key to their usefulness. So to me, 9 really talks about, the long form, it talks about leadership and kind of what I would call servant leadership. So if you think about all the stuff you're involved with, whether you're a parent or maybe a leader in your church, or you're involved with stuff in your community, or even at work. I always think about what kind of example am I setting by the way that I conduct myself. The tradition talks about a true leader is somebody that you can trust, somebody that has experience, and they don't try to. It kind of ties back into tradition 1. We're not trying to have any authority over people, right? And if you think about people that you respect in life, and people that you actually go to confide in, those are folks that can be trusted, right? Those are folks that probably have something that you want, or that have that are actually they have experience, the things that you're talking to them about. And so for me, tradition 9 is it's about, I had to ask myself, what kind of example do I set by the way that I live, and the way that I talk to people, the way that I treat people, and do I try to garner respect from people by being useful? And it kind of ties into 10 that I shouldn't try to be divisive with people. I definitely purposely shouldn't try to incite any kind of conflict or reaction from people. And we'll get to 10 in a minute. So it's a controversial tradition now. So the question is on 9: Do I want to be useful? Do I want to carry out that primary purpose of being of service to God and to other people? Or is it more important for my opinions and my ideas to get out to people? This is talking about having, again, as we talked about earlier, kind of power with people instead of power over people. If I'm trying to get along with people and trying to do what's best for everybody, then I'm practicing what's called universal respect. And a lot of times I want to migrate to just people that believe like I do, right? Instead of honoring people's differences. The interesting thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is we talked about this earlier. We give titles to people. We'll give you a job, but you really don't have any authority over anybody. Now, I know sometimes the GSR will think they've got some authority over a group, or DCM will think he's got some authority over a district, or a guy that's sponsoring a lot of people he may think he has authority over people. But the reality is we don't, and we don't have any power over anybody. And our job as a trusted servant is to carry out the job that somebody has entrusted me to do. So that gets at number 9, is that, hey, if somebody gives me a job to do, I should do it. I should honor that commitment. On the flip side, I probably shouldn't agree to do a job that I can't do. Right? If I know I don't have the skill to do it, or I don't have the time to do it, I shouldn't agree to do it. It took me years to figure that out. Right? Because for some reason when I got sober, my first reaction, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Right? You may even finish what you asked me to do, but yeah, I got that. Yeah. And the next thing you know, he's done it. The next thing you know, right, I've overcommitted myself, and now I'm stressed out, and I can't do whatever it is you asked me to do. And I end up either not showing up or not fulfilling the obligation. So number 9 is all about fulfilling obligations and honoring commitments. So I got to be real kind of selective. That time is the most important thing we've got. Right? So the question would be, does my time line up with my ideals and line up with my spiritual aim of serving God and helping people? It's not always about doing more, but it's about doing the right things in the right way. 10 talks about no A group or member. I'll tell you. Let me tell you a few examples of number 9. So when my professional career was kind of in full swing, I started looking at ways to get involved in organizations for not the reason that the organization existed. I was doing it to basically get customers. And an example would be, I joined this Rotary Club. Rotary Club's got a great purpose. They got a great cause. And I joined the Rotary Club mainly to make a relationship with 2 guys so I could try to get some business out of them. Now, at the time I joined, if you'd asked me if that's why I joined, I wouldn't have said that, because I didn't, I was delusional, wasn't being honest with myself. I didn't care anything about eradicating polio or building wells out in Africa. I really didn't, which is what their purpose was. So I joined, and I was what I would call a part-time or half-ass member, because I really didn't care about the cause or care about the purpose. And so after about a year and what I would do is they had this commitment, you got to go to a meeting weekly. And what would happen is I wouldn't show up. I'd feel guilty. I'd apologize to everybody. Not show up the next week. Feel guilty. Apologize to everybody. Didn't show up. They'd ask me to do something. I would make up an excuse on why I couldn't do it. And then I just woke up one day. I'm like, what in the world am I doing? I mean, I'm doing myself a disservice. Definitely doing them a disservice. So I had to ask myself, is that really where I want to spend my time? And if I can't give full service to something, or if I can't be trusted to fulfill whatever the obligation is, I shouldn't be involved in it. And so, I made an amends and stopped going. It's a great organization. but it just didn't. I just didn't have time for it, and I didn't have a passion to do it. So I got out of it. So I did get the 2 customers, by the way. So it worked. It worked for that. But that's an example of where it's important for us to do things that we actually want to do, and do things that we can fulfill and meet, and have obligations that we can actually meet. And to just say yes to stuff, or to do stuff for an ulterior motive is not in line with serving God. It might serve a selfish purpose temporarily, but it's not good. 10 says no AA group or member should ever, in such a way as to implicate AA, express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion.
Sure. Let me get some more information so I can help you with that.
Big Brother's watching you, or watching me. Always. They got us. Sorry. That's right.
You mentioned politics.
That's what I was just thinking.
You mentioned politics.
Yeah.
That was it. They want to help you.
Express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. The alcoholics groups oppose no one. Concerning such matters, they can express no views whatever. So Alcoholics Anonymous basically has no opinion on any outside issue. It's really one of the main reasons that AA has stayed out of most controversy. Now, certain AA members have done things that have brought AA into controversy kind of publicly, but Alcoholics Anonymous has really never taken a stand on anything. And it's one of the reasons for our success. So when they get asked about alcohol reform, they have no opinion. They don't respond. When they get asked about religion, or when they get asked about alternative methods for recovery, they don't respond. Right? They don't have any opinion on that. One of the things that's helped me to understand personally is that not everything that comes to me, or not everything that I listen to, needs a response from me. See, it kind of goes back to that second tradition. When somebody is just telling me about their day, or just kind of talking about stuff, I don't always have to respond to it. They just want you to listen. It's the same thing with Tradition 10, is that if somebody comes to me with something, or if somebody's saying something that I don't necessarily agree with, I don't have to respond. If I overhear a conversation where 2 people are talking about something, I should mind my own business. I shouldn't just jump in and, hey, what are y'all talking about? Oh, well, let me tell you, I already know what they're talking about because I've been listening. Right? Yeah. So, it's one of my favorite comments that the truth doesn't need to be defended. Right? So, the truth is the truth. And there's nothing that anybody can do to change the truth about whatever the situation is. But right, my natural tendency is to debate and argue. Now I'm a guy that I don't do it anymore, but if we're arguing about something, you can agree with me, and then I'll keep arguing with you. Right? You ever done that? Right? So I mean, and I often wonder nowadays, like, so I wonder where is God in all that? If I just continue to argue with you, or I continue to debate you, even after you've agreed, or even if you haven't agreed, so where's the loving God at in that? So as an AA member, when it comes to group and AA activity, when I come to an AA activity or an AA group, even with people that I sponsor, that I shouldn't have any opinion on it. That especially when it comes to religion and politics and alcohol reform or alternative methods for recovery, that those discussions should be left out and that we should focus on you growing spiritually and taking these steps and getting your life in order. And that I should avoid any kind of conversation or debate about any of that. Because what happens is if you're new and I'm helping you and we start talking about politics, then if your politics don't line up with mine, I'm probably not going to be able to help you. Right? Or you're not going to let me help you. And so it's important to stay out of that stuff when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous work. Sitting out in front of the home group before the meeting starts. I probably shouldn't be talking about politics and religion. Probably shouldn't be talking about COVID because it turns people off. People overhear those conversations. They don't agree with you. It's going to create more debate, more controversy. Somebody's going to get their feelings hurt, or somebody's listening to it, and then they think they know what you believe by maybe something that they heard, and then they won't even talk to you at all. Right? It creates that division. So that's up to me to be conscious of, and to make sure that, hey, when I'm at my group, I'm there to help an alcoholic. Right? I'm not there to debate that stuff. It really has no room in our groups. Now, I've got views on all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. This tradition doesn't mean that we don't have opinions. It doesn't mean that we don't have ideas. What I got to do is I got to leave that out of my group. I've got to leave that out of my one-on-one help with alcoholics. Now, this one gets a little tricky nowadays because of social media. And if you're gonna, well, I'll just share what I do. So, it's no secret. I'm really involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life, and I'm committed to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just my path. I do other stuff, but I try to help a lot of people. I'm actively involved. And I also love social media. Okay? So, but because of my involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm very careful at what I post and what I like and what I do on social media because I know other AA members are watching. Now, again, this is one of those things I gave you that caveat at the beginning. This is just me. You do what you want to do. It doesn't matter to me. But I see that as kind of public controversy. So if I'm posting and sharing all kinds of political or religious things that are controversial, other people see that, and then I believe it affects how I can help people. I got views on it, but I don't need to air that out to everybody. And so I'm careful as to what I post on social media or what I do there because I want to be helpful to anybody. Right? I believe that the book says that I can avert death and misery for other people, and I want to offer that to anybody that wants it. I don't want to just help people that believe like I believe. And I know that that's not real popular nowadays, but we've got, and some of y'all have seen this stuff. It's bizarre to me, but we've got AA members that have literally had long-term relationships with people in the program. 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And in the last 4 years, so all that time, they never really knew what that other person's political or religious persuasion was. And over the last 4 years, they found out and basically just wrote them off because they didn't believe like they believed. And I wonder where God's at in that, where that loving God exists, where I'm going to basically tell you I can't be your friend anymore because you believe something a little different than I believe. This tradition would tell me that I shouldn't really have any opinion on that, and that we should be able to be friends and exist and be unified in our efforts to help other alcoholics, regardless of what our political beliefs are or religious persuasion. So if I believe that there's a loving God guiding all that, so it's an interesting it's an interesting tradition for sure. But my job is to help people, and my job is to try to extend the hand out, and regardless of what you believe or what you don't believe. In my personal life, if I get into a conversation or debate with somebody, this would be outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, what this tradition has taught me, and kind of along with the first two traditions, right? So the first two traditions in like a business group or a business meeting were kind of taught to, hey, voice your experience, voice your thoughts or your opinion, let the group vote, and then you should go along with what the group decides, right? That the wisdom of many is a little better than my own thoughts and ideas. That I should trust that process, right? That there's wisdom in many, right? So this tradition has taught me that, like, if I'm debating somebody, or that my job really is just, hey, I should express my view, let them know my stand on it, and then leave it at that. That comes back to the truth doesn't need to be defended. That for me to continue to debate somebody or to continue to argue with somebody, it's futile. It serves no good purpose. And for me to purposely start picking fights with people, which I've done a long time ago, or purposely incite some kind of controversy by making a comment, that's really not in line with this tradition. This tradition tells me to be calm, to be factual, to be low drama, right? To focus on facts and reality, not delusion and falsehood. Many times it's best to just keep my opinions to myself unless somebody's asking. This kind of goes back to, do I want to be helpful or not? Right? And I'm more concerned at being right than I am at trying to help people. And if I believe the truth is the truth, then I don't have to be right. So, my view on this is that I'm more important. I'm more into trying to be helpful to people instead of trying to be against them and divided. And some of the stuff that I could do, or some of the stuff that I see other people do, some of the stuff that I see people that I sponsor do, I don't know how they reconcile that with the 10th and 11th step at night. It's inconsistent. If you're going to try to live by principle and put principle before personalities, if you really believe that, and some of the stuff that some of us are doing, it doesn't line up. 11. We're right on schedule. Finish early and go play golf. Number 11 says our relations with the general public should be characterized by personal anonymity. We think AA ought to avoid sensational advertising. Our names and pictures as AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. Our public relations should be guided by the principle of attraction rather than promotion. There's never need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. So if I believe that the principle of attraction rather than promotion is important, it ties right back in with number 10. Right? If I'm constantly divisive, or I'm constantly creating controversy on social media, there's not much attraction in that. As an AA member, even as just a member of society. So 11, as it relates to Alcoholics Anonymous, you notice it never didn't say anything about. It says that we should be anonymous at that our AA members ought not be broadcast, filmed, or publicly printed. So again, it doesn't say anything about being anonymous at home. Doesn't say anything about being anonymous. I know AA members have been sober double digits, and their parents don't know they're members of AA. I mean, I don't know how that. It's the truth. I mean, I don't know how that can happen, but it does. It's silly to me. So it says that we should stay anonymous and broadcast films and print, not in the community, not at other places. It also says there's never a need to praise ourselves. We feel it better to let our friends recommend us. So again, Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't have any spokespeople, right? We don't have anybody that's out there at the public level with their names and their faces broadcast saying, hey, look at me, AA works, come and get it. I wish some of our non-alcoholic trustees would do that, but they're the ones that should be doing it. And maybe one day they will, like they used to, but anyway, that's another issue. But we do let friends recommend us, right? So my dentist, my doctor, psychiatrist, sober coach. I'm joking when I say all that. Wake up. Oh, we're almost done. Yep. I don't have a psychiatrist either. It was a joke. There's nothing wrong if you got one. I'm just saying I understand it. I don't. But those folks that see us sober, they're our best advocates, right? I mean, they see somebody like Dixon get sober. Dixon should have never got sober. The guy's a badass drinker. I mean, whoa, rough. But people see him sober and they know that AA works, right? That can be true for any of us. And the people that we're associated with, if they see an alcoholic, they'll they'll recommend them to us. A, avoid sensational advertising, right? So we don't do any crazy advertising. We do public broadcast, public service announcements that just have simple messages on them. But A doesn't do anything like that. So 11 on a personal level. It tells me that I probably should try to avoid doing anything sensational. That I should probably avoid high drama. Right? I love some drama. I hide it well, but I like it. That I don't need to praise myself. Right? So if we're going to think about what we talked about on the 12th tradition at the beginning, about being humble and about not taking credit and about staying right sized, I don't need to go out here and start telling people all the good things that I've done or all the good things that I think about. I don't need to go out here and start shouting from the rooftops all the things that I've accomplished in my life. That I should just have a quiet, humble, simple walk. And people, if you truly live in that way, people will just see it. You don't have to tell them. I don't have to ask for the raise at work. Right? I'm a guy that for a long time at work, they don't pay me enough. Oh, they missed that evaluation again this year, and then ain't gonna get a raise. I'm only get that 2% raise. Everybody else got 8%. Whatever it is, most of that stuff was never true. But I would work, and I would think that I had to tell people what I was doing, and I got to ask for stuff. And now they, in some schools and some places, they tell you that you got to do self-promotion and all that stuff. And all I can tell you is that the way this fits for me, like at work, was I just worked. I tried to fulfill that 5th tradition and did what they paid me to do, and I did that for a long enough period of time that over time I didn't have to self-promote. I didn't have to ask for a raise. I didn't have to ask for a promotion. That stuff just came. Now I had to be patient to let it happen. But the natural tendency is that we think that nobody pays attention and that we got to do all this stuff. And at some point I got to trust in God. I'm not trusting in a boss. I'm not trusting in a company. I'm trusting in the power of God, and I'm trusting in my own actions. And if my own actions are lining up with what God wants me to do and with what that job's paying me to do, then I got nothing to fear. And that I don't have to create stuff. And I worked at a company for a long time, and went from sweeping floors to another job, then another job, and another job, and basically progressed up through that organization to, from making $6 an hour to making a lot of money, and from being basically a floor sweeper to a president without ever asking for a raise or a promotion. It just happened by working hard and setting an example. And what I can tell you is that over time, I garnered a lot of respect from people at that company by just being humble and doing that. That folks that constantly are asking for stuff and constantly demanding stuff and constantly thinking they're entitled to something rarely make it. They might get a little short-term something, but long-term, those folks that are self-promoting and entitled, they rarely make it. That what's important is actions. What's important is what's in our heart. I don't have to praise myself and self-promote. I don't have to post my chips on Facebook. So it's another. If you post chips on Facebook, that's fine. That's your decision. But being sober and being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is about being humble, and it's about what this right here says is that we don't have to praise ourselves. We don't have to disclose that stuff at the public level. So really, if I'm posting my chip on Facebook or Instagram, and I'm talking about how grateful I am, I mean, it seems innocent and it just seems wonderful. And I'm letting people know that it works. I'm not hear all that. But what I've just done is I've basically told everybody I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's my right to do that. But I've publicly disclosed that to everybody at a broadcast level. And now my so-called gratitude is really just turned into it's a selfish motive. You know, I think I'm trying to help people and I'm showing people that it works, but it's really just, hey, look at me. You know, look at what I've done, and it's really not in the spirit of 11 and 12. And I know that people do that. There's even people that want to rewrite the traditions so that stuff can kind of be okay. But gratitude and thanks come by the way that I live and the way that I treat people, not by a social media post. The other thing I'll tell you one story. I was at a conference one time, and they were taking pictures. I'm actually a fan of taking pictures of that stuff. I think we should document some of that stuff. But I get home after the conference, and I've been tagged in a post on Facebook, and I look, and sure enough, it's me and these two people up on the stage, and right behind it is the circle and the triangle and the name of the conference. And innocent enough. It's fine. But what that person just did was that it's implied that the three people up there are members of Alcoholics Anonymous because it's clearly stated in the banner behind it. And so she kind of broke those three people's anonymity, plus all the people that they're friends with and all the folks that tag in and like it. I mean, now you see the whole community of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I called her and I said, you probably should take that post down. And she didn't know. It was just innocent enough. She was excited about the conference, but that's another kind of example of we really don't need to be doing it. And something that seemed innocent and kind of nice enough was really kind of, it impacted other people. And it basically, the internet and social media is a public broadcast nowadays. And it's the same thing. So I got to try to avoid that, and it can be hard to not want to praise yourself. Right? It just seems like that's kind of the thing to do nowadays. Look at me, and but it's kind of inconsistent with the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's okay for somebody else to praise you. Yeah, we should do that, but I don't have to do it myself. One of the best examples of this is about, many of y'all have heard this story before, but I'll tell it again. I was at, and it's going to sound like I'm promoting myself by saying the story, but but it was kind of the final thing where I woke up and I'm like, I understood it better. I was at my older brother's house for Thanksgiving. All the family was there. My younger brother was not there. He was off in Afghanistan doing more important work than Thanksgiving with the dinner, with the family, evidently. And but he had, my younger brother had just published this book, and he was, at that time, he'd become real popular in the media with some of the stuff he was doing over in Afghanistan. And he was kind of sought out by lots of different organizations and different people. And he had been on Good Morning America, and Peter Jennings had done this interview with him. And we were at, I laugh now thinking about this. So we were at my other brother's house for Thanksgiving. All the family was there except for him. And my mom starts talking about how great my brother is, and starts praising him for all his work he's doing, and talking about his book. And they interviewed her and my dad on the Good Morning America or one of those shows. It might have been 2020. I don't know what it was. But now this kind of goes back to the potato chip story. When she was saying all that, what I heard was that John's better than Jerry, Jerry's a piece of trash, Jerry's never accomplished anything, John's smarter than Jerry. Huh?
You're a floor sweeper.
A floor sweeper. And she didn't say any of that. No. And but in my mind, that's what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking like, hang on, Mom, don't you know all the stuff I've done? I've been sober for a few years, and I've overcome all that, and I'm working for this company, and I'm the youngest general manager they've ever had, and they actually published an article about me in a Raleigh paper, and I'm thinking this. I didn't say anything. And I'm helping people in prisons and detoxes, and I got mad. I mean, I got really aggravated. Now, I didn't say anything to her, but for the next day, silent treatment, doing stuff like this, just to let people know I'm not feeling good, You ever done that?
That's secret.
And maybe not quite that, but we drove home from Atlanta back to Coates, silent treatment, and just terrible. And I've been sober a while at this time too. And here's what happened was that we got home, and that Sunday night I went to my home group at Willow Springs, and the topic that night was the 11th tradition. And I'll never forget it. Tony Smith was chairing it, and he read some stuff on the 11th tradition, and he read that when he read that thing, there was no need to praise ourselves, and he talked about humility and not getting credit, and it just hit me that, well, number one, I got a distorted mind, that I hear things way different than what people actually are saying. I mean, I'll make stuff up in my mind, but that my mom never said anything bad about me. All she was doing was talking about one of her sons that she was proud of, and that I take things the wrong way. And luckily, I didn't verbally say anything, but my nonverbal actions certainly showed that I was aggravated with her. But it hit me that what's important is my relationship with God and what I'm doing and what my actions are, and not what I think other people think about me, and not trying not to have any dependencies on approval or validation from other people. That the question for me is, and I realize how silly all that stuff was. That what I want to do is I want to make everything about me. She's trying to have a moment about being proud of one of her sons, and I'm all mad and aggravated that she ain't spouting off about me. So I made it all about me, and that what 11 and 12 really are about is it's not about me, it's about you, and what can I do to help other people? What can I do to pay back the gift that God's given me? And if I'm caught up in myself and caught up about all the things that I think I've done or how great I am, then I miss the point that what this is about is it's service to other people, and that by serving other people, and that by trying to serve God, I get everything I need and most of what I want. But I shouldn't make that the priority. That puts us back at 12. And we're right on schedule, Grasshopper.
It's wonderful.
Isn't that good news? You ready to roll?
Would you like us to praise you, Beth?
So, praise me, brother. Praise me. The good thing, the reality is that the last thing any of us need is a bunch of praising. Right? Because our daggone heads and our egos will just swell up. And because the truth for me is that of and by myself, I believe I'm nothing. That if I don't have God and I don't have people in my life, then I'm not going to make it. And that's where I've got to truly practice humility and try as best as I can. The good thing about step 12 is it says we practice. We practice principles in all of our affairs. So that implies we're going to make mistakes, so we're not going to live up to those ideals. And that's okay. We just keep practicing. We just keep practicing. I hate sports analogies, but thanks. If you think about like a professional sports player, most of them lose more than they win. Okay? I mean, very few professional sports folks win the championship. But they keep playing, right? They don't. When they lose a game, they don't start crying and take their marbles and go home. They don't give up. But that's what I do. One little thing doesn't go my way. Oh, this sucks. They ain't gonna do that in the morning, and I go do something else. Or I make one little mistake. I can't do this. I start sucking my thumb. Go to the nursery room, right? And so, if a sports person did that, they would never make it. They just keep practicing. That's what we're supposed to do with the spiritual stuff. Is we just keep practicing. We grow a little, learn a little. We might make a mistake, we might fall short, but we just keep practicing, keep moving forward. So we read how it works so much we don't even listen to it, but it talks about spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. So what I got to do is I just got to stay in the game and continue to progress spiritually. I got to give myself a break. I got to give other people a break. I got to not be so hard on myself, and try to honestly just do the best I can each day. And if I do that, I'll probably, for sure, stay sober, and will probably have a pretty good life if I can remember to do that. But I got to keep practicing, and I truly got to believe that serving God is more important than getting my opinion and my ideas across to everybody. That practicing those principles should be the most important thing. And the other thing about the 12th tradition is it's really it tells me that I should be a guardian of the program. And that it's easy nowadays to just think that anything goes and that all these ideas are old and antiquated and that people can do whatever they want to do. Certainly you can. But you can't violate spiritual principles and get away with it. If you violate a spiritual principle, you're eventually going to pay the consequences of it. It looks like people get away with it, but we never really do. And So it's my responsibility to be a good guardian of the steps and a good guardian of the traditions, and to teach people the intent and of what they are, and most importantly, to try to live them out in my life and to try to set an example for that. Because people's lives are online, and the idea that anything goes and that things don't apply anymore, and the idea of just canceling everything, and we don't need to do this, we don't need to do that anymore. Well, those things have been proven to help almost 3 million people now. And the idea that we're just going to abandon that stuff and do something different, certainly we need to look at better ways of doing stuff, but the traditions are just as relevant today as they were 80 years ago or 70 years ago. They've been proven through time to help people not only stay sober but live good lives. I'll read something. At the bottom of, let's go to Roman numeral 16, XVI. So we're going to start there in the middle of the page here. So Bill Wilson has gotten sober and he's trying to help other people. It says, prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic. But he had succeeded only in keeping sober himself. So basically, for 6 months, Bill Wilson stayed sober by trying to help other people. He got out of himself. The steps and traditions are designed to destroy self-centeredness. That's our main problem, right? It's selfishness and self-centeredness. We want to call it other stuff, and it masquerades as other things, but our problem is we're selfish, we're self-centered, we're full of fear. The only way to overcome that is to do something outside of yourself. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician, Dr. Bob. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. So Dr. Bob had tried spiritual stuff. He had tried some of the same spiritual stuff that Bill Wilson had tried in the Oxford group. But he couldn't stay sober because he thought that by practicing spiritual stuff, that would help him control his drinking. Right? He didn't realize that once he started drinking, he had a physical allergy. An unemployed stockbroker had to explain that to the doctor. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. Spiritual malady, spiritual remedy. He sobered up, never to drink again, up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. So that dispels another myth that we can recover permanently. We never have to drink again if we're willing to work with other alcoholics and strenuously work with other alcoholics. And that an alcoholic can help another alcoholic better than a non-alcoholic. So these two cats are sober. They realize that they must help somebody else in order to stay sober themselves. Hence, the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics driving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3. He never had another drink. So that was a guy named Bill Dotson. They helped him in the hospital. He took the first step, 8 steps of the program in the hospital, never drank again. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. So they failed with more people than they helped, but they kept doing it. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. So they're claiming that the Akron group was the first group. That would be called the King's School Group. A second small group promptly took shape at New York to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Yeah. So it says, besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. So in 1937, there were a few people sober, none of them more than a few months. A couple of them had a couple years, Bill and Bob, and the other Bill, and they're calling that substantial sobriety time. So if you've been sober a few days, you've got substantial sobriety time. But more importantly, the program has shown the light on the darkness inside of us. And when we're in the middle of alcoholism, the world becomes dark. The program shines light. The group in Cleveland that was started in 1937 was started by the guy whose grave we're going to go to. Some of us are going to go to here in a little while. I told my wife we were going to the grave. She's like, who died? And then I told her what was going on. She's like, that's stupid. I don't know why y'all are doing that.
It's a spiritual experience.
So the guy that's in Cameron that we're getting ready to go visit here in a little while, he was the guy that started that group. So he was sponsored by Dr. Bob. He got sober, I think it was in February of 37. I think that's right. And I mean, many of y'all know the story. I'll tell just a little bit of it, but he was traveling down to Akron to the group there, going to meet with Dr. Bob. And he wanted to start a group in Cleveland, but most importantly, he wanted to help folks that weren't Protestant. Right? So at that time, the group in Cleveland and Akron was basically helping just what they called back then Protestants and men. And Clarence wanted to help Catholics, and he also wanted to help women. And Dr. Bob wasn't having nothing to do with it. So Dr. Bob thought that at that time that no, we just need to stick to the first century Christianity stuff. We need to keep it to men. And Clarence, so this is when you should be grateful for,
Diversity.
That's right. You should be grateful for renegades and there's enough rebels, right? So this is when I'm not telling you to be a rebel, right? So Clarence basically went against the guidance of his sponsor. He said, no, he says, we need to make sure. He says, there are people dying left and right. So they started the group in Cleveland. Now, there's a talk that I've listened. I've got the talk that Clarence says that the first night they met, a bunch of the folks from Akron came up to try to stop it and shut it down because they really didn't think that they should be meeting, but they continue to meet. And depending on who you talk to, you'll hear different stories, but I think it's pretty factual that group was the first group that used the name Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, there was definitely a group in Akron and there was a group in New York, but the group that Clarence started in Cleveland was the first group that actually started using the term Alcoholics Anonymous from the book that had just been published. So that's why Clarence claims he started the first group of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've got a talk where he starts it off, and he says, I know you're going to hear a lot of stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. You've heard a lot of stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous about how it got started. You've heard a lot of stuff about me. He says, I really don't care about any of that stuff, but here's what I can tell you. Regardless of what you heard, the group in Cleveland was the first group to be called Alcoholics Anonymous, and he swears it's true. And I think it is. You could argue if it was really the first actual group, since there were two other groups that were doing stuff. But he initially started what we would call wholesale recovery by opening up the doors to anybody, and by really trying to go into hospitals and offering what we would call sponsorship to people that were either in hospitals or other places of recuperation. And really was the first, even more so than Akron and New York, was the first kind of group that really used the book. Even though the book was new, but they really believed in the formula in the book and really kind of indoctrinated people in the steps in the book and certain books out of the New Testament, and kind of came up with how most of us understand sponsorship today and how most of us understand a home group. He's really the one that came up with those concepts and kind of the ideas about all that. And you can read some of those early pamphlets that him and folks in his group wrote about sponsorship, the manual for Alcoholics Anonymous, and there's a couple more. You can still buy them from Cleveland and Akron Intergroup. But he really kind of defined Alcoholics Anonymous as we would know it. And he was very divisive, and him and Bill Wilson didn't get along, and Clarence never completely bought into the traditions, and publicly kind of admonished Bill Wilson and for various reasons. but we heard that I was in. I think it's written too. You can read it and pass it on, or Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, and some other letters. But I was in San Diego at the International Convention in 1995, and Nell Wing was still alive, and she was there, and she was Bill Wilson's secretary for a long time and kind of helped run the GSO office. But she made the comment that if Clarence hadn't been such a, she didn't use the word that I was going to use, if he hadn't have been so obnoxious to Bill that Bill probably would have given him credit for being a tri-founder or a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, but they just didn't get along. But he's an interesting character. And if you never listened to one of his talks, you ought to listen to it. His story's in the 3rd and 2nd edition of our book called Home Brewmeister. So if you ever get a chance, you can read it. But he was a polarizing character. All organizations need them because it keeps people on their toes and it really makes you think about what you believe and what you don't believe. Plus, he probably helped way more people than Bill ever did, as far as getting their lives in order and trying to get them a path to God. So, I think we're going to go visit his graves. Now, it's interesting. Bill's gravesite and Dr. Bob's gravesite make no mention of Alcoholics Anonymous. Clarence's does. It says on his tombstone it says he led the way in AA. Yeah, you'll see it.
I think that was his friends that put that on.
Yeah, people that he sponsors put that on there. He didn't put that on there. No. All right, I think we're done here. Anybody got any comments or questions? Practice traditions in your life.
Thank you.
We want to